Hi everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Is back talking about books. Today we are going to be doing the full-length video about Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This is the first book to the Part of Your World series. I'm just going to talk about it, do my little review, all of my thoughts. I am a little bit congested today, so that's why I sound like this. Let's just get straight into it. Let's talk about this book. It was my second favorite book of the series. These rankings and how I feel about it are all going to change. This series is a series of 3 books. They are romantic comedy books following women in the medical field because that is the commonality I found in all of them. And it takes place in Minnesota. This is the first book of a series of 3. It follows a woman named Alexis who is a very rich and nepo baby doctor. She works at one of the world-renowned hospitals in Minnesota, in the big city in Minnesota, and she comes from a generation of doctors. So she is a doctor at this hospital, really world-famous hospital, and it follows Alexis and her love interest name is Daniel, who is a small town bachelor mayor, they call him. I don't even know if he's actually the mayor of this small town. A small town in Minnesota called Wakan, W-A-K-A-N. Please correct me if I'm wrong. It is a small fictional town. Think Gilmore Girls, a small town in Gilmore Girls, Stars Hollow. That is the vibe I get from this small Minnesota town. Basically, it is in the middle of nowhere with a very close-knit community in this town. Background on Alexis is she is a doctor and also broke up with her, I believe it was her fiance, who was very verbally abusive to her. Her entire family is trying to get Alexis back together with her ex-fiance, and they don't realize that she does not want to get back with him, does not want to get back with her ex, and her ex is basically stalking her, doing all these things around her, trying to win her back, but she doesn't want him back. That is sort of a side plot. Just abused her verbally and treated her really badly. How the story starts out is that Alexis's car, seemingly in the middle of nowhere, gets broken down, and that is how she meets Daniel, the love interest. He helps her a little bit with her car, and once her car is up and running, she goes to a small diner nearby in the town, and he's also coincidentally there. Next thing you know, things happen, people are talking, yip-yapping, whatever, and she goes home with Daniel. To Daniel's house, I think it was one of those things where Daniel's friends made a bet. Honestly, I'm trying to remember right now, but it's been a little bit since I've read this book, okay? I'm like 5 books down since I've read this, so I'm trying to remember. Please correct me if what I'm saying is wrong. From what I remember, I believe Daniel's friends at the bar saw that there's this new girl here. Like, who is this woman? She came from nowhere. It's a small town where everybody knows each other. Who is this girl? And they were saying like, oh, $10. Like, they made a bet, like, oh, who could take her home? And they're like, you guys are so stupid. I would never do that. Alexis and Daniel make an agreement. Hey, let's get out of here. I will leave with you. Let's like split the money or something. I believe that's how it happens. I'm down to just leave with you so that we could split the money. Stick it to their faces, all of Daniel's friends. And he was like, okay. So they end up going to his house. Next thing you know, it turns into a date. Next thing you know, they actually do end up hooking up. They hit it off, and it is basically a one-night stand for Alexis, but it is also potentially the best one-night stand they've ever had and the best date that they have ever had with each other. It is a small-town romance. It is hookup to lovers, which I love a good hookup to lovers. It is guy falls first. It is a forbidden romance. There's also the age gap trope with Alexis being an older woman. I believe she's in her mid to late 30s while Daniel is 25 to 27. There is quite an age gap there, but it's the woman that's older than the man, which I kind of like because I think it subverts expectations a lot, and they don't talk about this age gap in huge ways, if that makes sense. It's not a kink. It's not like, oh my god, she's a cougar. It really felt like it was just one part of the whole situation that they were in. The storyline for me is really reminiscent of The Notebook, the movie and the book by Nicholas Sparks, in the way that is 2 people from different worlds. Part of Your World, it's 2 people from different worlds. The woman comes from a very, very wealthy family who has very specific expectations put on her about who she's supposed to marry and who she's supposed to be with, while the man is not. And is not as wealthy, is kind of rugged, comes from a smaller town. Then they have a whirlwind romance. Daniel and Alexis, over time, she keeps her life separate. She goes to work during the weekday and she on the weekends goes to see Daniel because she just loves being around him and is slowly falling in love with him, even though she doesn't want to admit it to herself. But at the same time, she says that it's just them having fun with each other. It's just them hooking up. But in reality, they are falling in love with each other. So they have this whirlwind romance. It feels like they can't be together because of the woman's wealthy background, because of her family issues. And spoiler, this is going to have a bit of spoilers, but it's a rom-com. You know there's going to be happily ever after, okay? The plot of this book is pretty obvious, but she gives it all up to live with him in the middle of a small town. They always talk about throughout the book dying on the same day. Like, tell me that is not like The Notebook. They literally talk about it in The Notebook about dying on the same day, and they die on the same day. It was just very reminiscent of The Notebook to me. That is sort of the synopsis of the book. Now to get into my thoughts. I honestly picked up this book and I didn't really like it. Didn't really give it much of a chance. The writing for me felt really weird when I started it off. And it took me a while to get into the writing. It just felt like it was badly written. Now, mind you, this is when I started the book, okay? I don't know what it was about it. It just felt like the story didn't know where it was going and that it was just trying to find its footing along the way. It felt like how a Wattpad author writes the first chapters of a book and releases chapter by chapter every single week, but she's figuring out the story as she goes along. That's sort of how it felt like. It kind of felt like it was written like Wattpad. The way that things were said and told and the story was told to us instead of showing to us. So many times where Alexis would say, oh my god, we hit it off. The chemistry was off the charts. We always talked throughout the night. We talked all night long. The sex was so good. I'm like, girl, can we see any of that? Can we see the chemistry being off the charts? Can we see the tension? Especially in the beginning of the book. It was really, she went to his house and then they hooked up and they didn't show us any of that, right? And then she leaves his house the next morning and they don't show us any of that, and then she just talks about it after. Oh yeah, like we hit it off. It's like telling your best friend a story of an amazing night that you had the night before, but not actually showing us that amazing night. I don't really believe you because I didn't feel it. She's like, the chemistry was off the charts. I can't stay away from him. I love spending time with him. I'm like, can we see that? I don't believe you as a reader. I need to actually see it. At least like one scene. Like, give me one scene. I felt like in the beginning because they did that a lot. And the way that it was written, there was not really a lot of literary language, not a lot of metaphors, which I do not need in a book at all, especially in a rom-com. But they didn't have anything that where you could viscerally feel the emotions of characters. However, even though the story was weirdly set up, once the story found its footing, which was maybe 30 to 40% of the way through the book, I started to really like the book and really enjoy myself while reading it. I don't know what happened. After the 30-40% mark, something within Abby Jimenez just clicked and the story was like, whoo, like it just kept getting better and better as I kept reading. Daniel as a character is so sweet. And all he wanted to do was provide for Alexis. He doesn't feel like he's enough for her because he doesn't know much about her life in the big city. She also makes it very apparent that he isn't enough for her, which is really sad at the same time. And all he wants to do is prove anything to her that he would be enough for her, that he would provide for her in certain ways. Maybe he doesn't have money, but he will be there for her in any other way that she needs. And I really loved that. Another thing I liked and disliked at the same time, this is sort of a flaw of the book, but at the same time, I liked it. The third act conflict. Was it very predictable? Absolutely. It was maybe, quite honestly, the most predictable third act conflict I could have ever seen in a romance book I've ever read in my life. It was so predictable. I found the solution to the third act conflict by chapter 3. By chapter 3, I already knew exactly how the book was gonna end. It was just Alexis getting there. Although it was so predictable, like maybe the most predictable third act conflict I've ever read, it felt like a real one. A real problem that real people go through. It wasn't based on miscommunication. It felt like a conflict that was actually harder to solve and made the stakes of the relationship higher. It had to do with her family. It had to do with finances. It had to do with location, long distance, with the duty to your family, sacrifice, even getting along with your in-laws. If Daniel were to be with Alexis, he would have to be in her family and in her life. I think it makes sense why Alexis felt the way that she did throughout the book, felt like she couldn't sacrifice everything just for Daniel. Sacrifice her entire career, her entire family, all solely and put it all on one person. And at the same time, it puts a lot of pressure on that one person to live up to that, right? So I'm like, damn, even though this third act conflict is so obvious, and also the way it's solved was really obvious, I feel like it's so real at the same time, and it was inevitable for their relationship. It did feel like one of those things, like if they could get through that as a couple, then they could get through anything. Overall, I did really like that. No matter how predictable it was, I think as a book, all romance books, all rom-com books are predictable. That is the essence of a romance. We know how it's gonna end. It's gonna end in happily ever after. If you're reading a rom-com, it's going to end that way. I'm not talking about any sad romantic drama books. I'm talking about rom-coms. It will end in a happily ever after. It's the journey that you stay for as a romance reader. It's finding the connection between two people. That is why we stay. That is why we read. That is also why I feel like it's one of the harder genres to write about. With them showing that conflict and how they resolved it and how much they yearned for each other, they did really well in this book. And that is another thing that I love about this book is I don't know when this happened, but I started to cry so much towards the end of reading this book. I don't know how, I don't know why, but I was literally reading it on the airplane and tears started rolling down my face. Like, could you imagine how embarrassing that is? Could you imagine me on the airplane coming back from my trip? I'm reading on my Kindle. You just hear this. The flight attendant comes over. Would you like chicken or beef? I'm like, can I get chicken? It's so embarrassing, but I literally did do that. I think the reason why I was crying so much is because of the yearning. If there's one thing I need in romance, okay, that I love in a romance, and that is also why no matter how predictable and copy and paste any Ali Hazelwood book is, I will still read her, is because she knows yearning. She knows longing. And I think in this book, they did that. I really felt the yearning. I felt the pining. Like, we need to bring back pining in romance books, okay? Please bring back pining. I have been saying this since the beginning of my channel, okay? Bring back pining. We need yearning. We need pining in books, and I just feel like they don't have that a lot nowadays. And you could have that in every romance book has to have yearning and longing and pining. Even smutty books, like I'm a firm believer in that. And in this book, Daniel, no matter that he sees her every single weekend, that they see each other all the time, there was a timeline to their relationship because she said, once I get my promotion, I believe she said, once this specific thing happens, then we are ending the relationship. Like, there was a timeline, which I love too. It just raises the stakes. Even though he was technically with her, he was still missing the other part of her life. He was yearning for her and yearning for that part of her life and wanting all of her and needing all of her and wanting Alexis to choose him. The more I'm talking about this, maybe this is one of my favorite of the series. Maybe this one is my, like, maybe I really like it a lot more than I did. But I just think they did that really well. And that's why I cried so much throughout the second half of the book. After the beginning 30% and I didn't know where it was heading, the writing was weird, the setup was weird, and then I got to the 40% mark and on, and I just started tears rolling down my face. So much longing, pining. They want each other, but they can't have each other. It's forbidden romance. Oh my god, I was eating that up. I was eating it up. Then I was like, this is a really good book for me. Lastly, the thing I also really liked about the book was that Alexis, the main love interest, not only fell in love with a person, but she fell in love with a place. That place was a character within itself. Walk-In, Minnesota. It had its own personality, it had its own character, and they even put elements of magical realism into the book. They kept saying over and over again in the book that the town knows what it needs, and in that instant, the town didn't want Alexis to leave. They wanted her to stay, and there would be windstorms that happened if she were to want to leave. Trees would fall down, like chaos would ensue, because it felt like the town was missing her, along with Daniel. And I really liked that. I love the little magical realism in it. I think that's what it would be considered. So those are all the things I really liked about the book. Now to get into my dislikes is, I already told you the beginning was iffy. The writing is not amazingly metaphorical, but I didn't really need that because we got the longing and everything. It's a lot of small things, right? Every book has its flaws, and there are a lot of small things. I would say side characters were all one-dimensional to me. They didn't really mean much, and I didn't really care for any of the side characters in the book. As a reader, I didn't really mind it. The chemistry between Alexis and Daniel. I could feel how much they wanted each other. I could feel how much they loved each other. But because they didn't solidify in the beginning, it was all tell and don't show, I didn't feel that they were soulmates, okay? And that is, I guess, why I told myself when ranking the series, I liked the second book better, Yours Truly, than I did this one, is because in the second book, and I'll talk about it when I talk about that book, is that you could really feel that they're meant for each other, that they understand each other on an innate level. There's nobody else in the world for each other than them. That is how book 2 is. And you can see it through their actions, the way that they can read each other's faces about what their needs are, what their wants are. In this book specifically, it didn't really show the connection, the specific scenes of connection between these two characters. I know you, I know what you need. It was more a book about sacrifice and loving someone so much that you want to sacrifice for them. But I didn't know the reasons why they loved each other. They just said the chemistry was really good and that they loved each other. And because they sacrificed so much, I'm like, yeah, I can see that they love each other, but it was like on an emotional level. To begin with, I didn't get it, if that makes sense. Still, overall, really loved the book. That is my small little review on Part of Your World, the first book in Abby Jimenez's Part of Your World series. What do I rate this book? I haven't given it a rating yet. I would say it's a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really liked it. I think it started off not strong, but ended really well. I loved all the tropes they had in here. I loved all the stakes they had. I loved the plot of it. I think the characters within itself just maybe wasn't the strongest thing in here. I loved it. I thought it was very realistic for a romance, and it was just very heartwarming and sweet. And like, get you a man who will provide for you. That is what I love about Abby Jimenez books too, is that all of these men in here, all they want to do is take care of the girls and take care of their women. And I'm like, I need that. I love that. To end off the video, I'm just gonna state some of my favorite quotes that I have through my Goodreads. 8,000 nerve endings in the clitoris, and still not as sensitive as a white man not getting his way. I just thought that was funny. This is what I mean by the town as its own character is what's alive. This place, it breathes like you and me. It's got magic to it. I realized that I would try things with him that I hadn't tried with anybody. He made me feel uninhibited like that and safe. I think the safe thing was the biggest part of it, actually. Safe. He made her feel safe. And you know what? In a romance book, that is the most romantic thing that I could ever think of. I feel so utterly comfortable and safe with someone, like, I eat it up, okay? Every time I was with him, he built me up. He gave me back something that Neil stole. And Neil was her ex who was abusive to her. I drew in a long breath and let it out slowly. The relationship with Neil was abusive. His brows drew down. He hit you? I shook my head. No. He was mean. Daniel studied me. I couldn't interpret the look on his face. What? I asked. He shook his head. I would never be mean to you. The comment hit me right in the heart. It was so earnest. The bar is so low. All he said was, I would never be mean to you. I'm sitting here eating it up. But like, it is kind of cute. Just found that like, like he's like, I would never be mean to you. Why did that get me? As a reader reading that, I was like, oh my God, that's so cute. That's what I'm talking about. Like, there's a lot of tell and no show. She said, we had that easy flowing conversation that you rarely find with somebody. I'm like, can we see that conversation then? I take my hand and press it to your cheek and look you in the eye. Then I tell you that you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, that I think you're brilliant and kind, and seeing you is the highlight of my entire week. That when you're on your way, I'm already dreading you leaving. And when I'm with you, I'm happy. You know what's so dangerous about drowning? I said, looking up at him. It's silent, so unless somebody's paying close attention to you, no one saves you. He brushed my hair off my forehead. I see you. I would save you if you were drowning. It was sweet, but he wouldn't, because I wasn't drowning here with him. I was drowning 2 hours away from here, alone. There's just so many parts of this book that it gets you in the heart. It gets you in the heart. And then he buys her a rock 2 hours to find that rock in the forest. The most perfect rock ever, just like a rock on the floor. Best gift she's ever had, and she keeps it and she holds it so close to her heart. He pulls out something and puts it in my palm. It was a rock about the size of a walnut, smooth and gray. It's shaped like a heart, he said. Took me 2 hours to find it. My heart disintegrated. It broke from my inside and crumbled in my chest. I highlighted this because I thought it was so reminiscent to Perks of Being a Wallflower. It says, "Nobody likes assholes," I said quietly. "Sometimes that's just what you think you deserve." Okay, we accept the love we think we deserve. So Perks of Being a Wallflower, 4.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was so cute. I thought this read was so wholesome, and the second part of it just kind of blew me away. I don't know how it did that. It really did. So thank you so much for watching. Please, if you've read this book, let me know your thoughts on it below. Tell me your favorite of the series. I know some of you have already told me on my last video on Happy Jimenez, but tell me your favorite of the series and why, which one's your least favorite, and everything like that. But yeah, I really loved it. Just let me know your thoughts, and I will catch you in the next one.